Good day, class. So this major part of the course is about two mainstream discourses on justice, utilitarianism and libertarianism. So this presentation will be about utilitarianism. Another video will be out for libertarian justice or libertarianism later on. So as you listen to this, take note of the similarities and differences, and of course, always take note of the question, what is justice according to these discourses of justice? So the reading that I assigned for utilitarianism is this case of the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens, 1884. Another case like the trolley problem, wherein we are asked to revisit or review our own notions of justice or what feels right for us, or do we agree to the outcome, agree on the outcomes of this specific case. So like in the trolley problem, I ask you to read it and to form your opinions on it. We will also be discussing this in the next synchronous session, so make sure that you have read it. And the focus question for the synchronous session the focus case for the synchronous session would be this one. But the main points that I want you to look at in this case would be the case wherein there are four sailors in a boat, in a small boat, or in the case it's actually referred to as a yacht. So there are four people there, and then two of those people agreed to kill one, the youngest of them all. Okay, so they claim that they draw lots. They wanted to draw lots, but one of them dissented. He doesn't want to be part of the decision, but they agreed to kill the youngest, the weakest sailor, the boy, in order for them to survive at sea. So they were stranded there for about 20 days, and they have no supply of water and food. And they say that if they did not kill the boy then and ate his flesh, for the next 4 days, because at that point they were already 20 days in the sea. So they ate the boy from day 20 to day 24, where a ship passed by to pick them up. Okay, so um, yeah, so the question is, do you agree that this was murder? Or do you agree that it is just right? It is just right that they ate the boy so that they would survive, because the case is that if they did not eat the flesh of the boy, they would not survive for the next 4 days. And their argument was that um, the boy is dying anyway. So is that a legitimate reason, okay, to actually sacrifice one life for three other lives? Okay, so because that's the case, they will not uh, have survived. They would not have survived if they did not eat the flesh of the boy. Okay, so according to the reading, there was no appreciable chance of saving life except by killing someone for the others to eat. So they did this, they killed the boy out of great necessity. But if you remember our conversation about our discussion about the trolley problem, a big thing about justice is choice and intention. And definitely it was their intention to kill the boy so that they could have something to eat. So in the end, they were indicted for murder, but the rest of the reading was just people defining or trying to argue what is necessity, and is necessity a form of a self-defense that you can argue that you just did self-defense, or it was just a necessity that you had to kill someone. So is that a crime? So these are the things that we will be discussing. So another argument is that it is actually murder because the boy could have survived. So it's the what if he survived, what if he was not killed, his flesh eaten. Okay, or could we look at this case in another angle, wherein um, we argue that no matter what your necessity is, what your needs are at that moment, that you should not kill another person. So let's get back to this case when we do our synchronous session. So make sure that you read this. Right, so taking note of that case and the trolley problem too, because these problems, these dilemmas would be very important and very related to utilitarianism. So according to utilitarianism in all of its forms, human beings naturally have two sovereign masters. So it is pleasure and pain. So the aim of human life, the aim of life of humans is to increase pleasure and to reduce pain. Okay, so they also equate happiness with pleasure. Okay, so at this point, I want you to ask yourself, what gives you pleasure? Is it food? Is it watching movies? Being with your significant other? Work? Okay, so is it a fact that you want more of these things? No, you want more food, more free time to watch movies or do your hobbies, more time with your significant other. Okay, and you want to reduce pain. So pain is the lack of these things. So lack of food, okay, gives pain, literal pain. And lack of free time will lead to burnout, and that would also lead to pain. So as humans, we aim to reduce that. So we aim to, as much as possible, to have more pleasure. So this is one of the basic tenets or the basic premises of utilitarianism. So what does this have to do with justice? So one of the earliest iterations of utilitarianism is what we know of utilitarianism now is a modern utilitarianism coming from Jeremy Bentham. But before Bentham, utilitarianism has been rooted in ethical theory by Epicurus or Epicureans, no, which is basically hedonism, which is pleasure, as we have discussed a while ago, or happiness is intrinsically good. Anything that makes you gives you pleasure, makes you happy, is intrinsically good. So the idea is that the outcome or ends of one's action should be to maximize happiness. So do you agree with this? That whatever makes us happy should be the ones that we are doing. So that's the prescriptive side of it. That whatever makes you happy, you should do it. Right. So utilitarianism in this philosophy no, is attributed to Jeremy Bentham. So in his work Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, so he's considered as the first modern proponent of utilitarianism. At the core of utilitarianism is the idea of the principle of utility, or the greatest happiness or felicity principle, a principle as the only right and justifiable end of government, the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So I know maybe from your ethics class you have already defined this. No, but here we actually contextualize this utilitarianism by Bentham in government and society, because that's what he said, that the purpose of government and society is for it to do things that will lead to the greatest happiness of the greatest numbers. So it's also very consequentialist, as is it associates the rightness or justness of an action with its consequences, effects, or outcomes. In short, a just action is one that produces benefits. So meaning, whatever you do, as long as it leads to the greatest happiness of the greatest number, then that thing that you did is right. Okay, so the idea also that happiness is equal to pleasure also came from Bentham. So that's also a core of his utilitarianism. So with regards to his idea of the government, he says that pleasures then and the avoidance of pains are the ends that the legislator has in view. Okay, so he also defined utility this way as a property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness, or to prevent the happening of mischief, pain, evil, or unhappiness to the party whose interest is considered. So the idea is that we look at the utility of situations and things. Okay, so we usually use the idea of utility. Like, for example, what is the utility of your phone, your smartphone, if you're able to watch short videos on it, if you're able to text and call in it, and that is actually useful to you, it has some benefit, it has some advantage, so you should keep it. So if it does not do all of those things anymore, then it has no utility anymore. Okay, so because you need to prevent pain or unhappiness. If you're unhappy with something, you should be able to the just thing to do according to utilitarianism, no, because the end or the purpose of our life is really to maximize happiness or to reduce pain, then you should not keep that phone anymore. Okay, so that's utility. So just to add to that, so if that is in the individual level, so according to Bentham, an action then may be said to be conformable to the principle of utility, or for shortness sake, to utility, meaning with respect to the community at large, when the tendency it has to augment the happiness of the community is greater than any it has to diminish it. Okay, so this is one of the controversial parts of utilitarianism, because if it just pertains to you, like for example, the things that are useful to you, has some utility to you, it's easy to understand it. So if something gives you pain, something gives you inconvenience, then uh it is not acceptable to keep it. But if we are referring now to the government or to the society, which is Bentham's idea, it's more controversial now. Why? Because think of a policy. Okay, so if it augments the happiness, meaning if you do something and it adds to the happiness of each individual person, and when you aggregate that, and at the end of your computation, everyone or majority is happy, then that policy is good. Okay, whatever the moral implications of such. Okay, so you can think of a policy like, for example, the lockdowns. Okay, the lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we are not happy about it. Okay, but if we consider pleasure as being healthy, okay, the government did this policy. For example, governments around the world did this policy for the sake of public health, for the sake of the majority, because being at home, okay, working from home, studying from home, is considered to be contributing to the general happiness of everyone, because no one will get sick or less people will get sick. So it is right, or it is just in the eyes of utilitarianism. Okay, so you can think of other policies like that that um, augments the happiness of the community. So it took some sacrifice on our part, meaning we had to stay at home, we had to postpone meeting our friends, meeting each other in the classroom, so that we could contribute to this, we could augment the happiness of the community, of the general population. So that's one application of this principle of utility. So, but Bentham was very serious about this. He is really adamant on saying that we should increase happiness, pleasure as much as possible, to the point that he formed or he created this hedonic or philosophic calculus, which measures quantitatively the dimensions of pleasure. So, of course, I won't do a computation here, but these are the elements that he considered for this calculus, which is This all refer to happiness, like intensity of happiness, like how happy you are, how pleasurable a thing is, how long are you happy, duration. Certainty, is it certain that you will be happy when you do this thing? Purity, meaning there is no pain involved in doing this thing. For propinquity, or the nearness or remoteness, how it's like the certainty, like how near, okay, how near in terms of time will you get this happiness or pleasure. Fecundity or richness is actually reproducing more of the same kind, meaning when you do this thing, will it produce more pleasure? Okay, and the extent, okay, how extent, meaning are you the only one affected by this happiness, or uh, are other people affected by it too? So there are many videos online actually about this, no, so you can look at that. But we can make some examples. Like for example, your favorite food or a favorite thing in the world is ice cream. Okay, so you did an exam and you're very stressed, so that's pain, right? Now you want to eat ice cream. So how much happiness can you get from getting ice cream? So is it intense, meaning are you very happy when you eat that ice cream? um Duration, how long will you be able to eat that ice cream? Of course it will melt, so it will be a short amount of time. You're certain that you will be happy because it's your favorite thing. It's pure because you know that there is no pain involved in that. So it's near, for example, in time, for example, you just need to walk 5 minutes so that you could buy it, or if you have it in your fridge. And then fecundity, richness, if you eat the ice cream, you will be happy, and then you will be less stressed throughout the day. The extent is that you will not uh, be masungit to other people. So, to the extent is that you also make them happy. Okay, so that's a simple, but there's a formula in it, of course. I get again, I will not calculate here, but these are the considerations of Bentham. So, but the idea is that, for example, for ice cream. So therefore, na-check niya lahat nung ano na to, na-check niya lahat nung dimensions na to, then the conclusion is you should do it. You should definitely get ice cream, right? So it also applies, of course, to other issues or other pleasurable things or activities. So think of one activity that you love, and think of whether it is intense, it is certain, it's pure, etc. So John Stuart Mill, and then his son, James Mill, are also proponents of utilitarianism. No, so they add to the utilitarianism of Bentham. So he is a student of Bentham also. Yeah. So um, for him, in determining the greatest happiness or utility, one should take into account both the quantity and the quality of the happiness or pleasure attained. So the basics are still there. That for him, happiness or pleasure is the end goal of everything. So for him also, one should always do the very best one can for as many as possible. Okay, so at this point, I want to point out that utilitarianism is looking at the big picture, meaning if there are 10 people in a classroom, 10 of those, the majority of those 10 people should be happy. So what's the majority? 5 plus 1? Half plus 1, which is 6. Okay, so 6 of them um, should be happy. It's quantitative, meaning every individual person is counted as one. Okay? So, what John Stuart Mill adds to utilitarianism is he is saying that we should not be looking only at quantity, but also the quality of the happiness. Though that was discussed already in the philosophic or the calculus of Bentham. Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill adds a more nuances to the idea of quality of happiness. So, yeah, to add to that, he also notes that each person should be counted as one and no more than one. And in taking that into consideration, we should aim for the greatest good of the greatest number. So, what is the quality of pleasure according to John Stuart Mill? It's we can divide or categorize pleasures into higher and lower. So higher pleasures are those that satisfy intellectual virtues, or those who can judge the quality of pleasure is only those that had experienced them. So what are examples of this? So example are self-reflection, okay, philosophy, studying, and theoretical problem solving. So those are the higher pleasure according to J.S. Mill. Lower pleasures are those bodily pleasures such as eating, drinking, having sex, for example. Okay, because for him, a human being dissatisfied is better than being a pig satisfied. So we should be able to qualify the quality of pleasure, meaning it's not just counting each person individually, okay, but also taking into consideration the quality of the pleasure that they have. So that's his addition to utilitarianism of Bentham. But it still stands that they both note that majority, okay, the greatest happiness of the greatest number should be the end goal of any decision, any policy, okay, because they're referring to governments and societies, okay. Okay, so one addition to the utilitarianism discourse, and I think is also very important that we know this, is of preference utilitarianism by Peter Singer. So in his work, Practical Ethics, in 1979, he outlines additions to classical utilitarianism by Bentham. So for him, our pleasures could be equated to our interests. Okay? So, according to him, in decisions, we need to be able to consider the interests of others, because that's what we are doing in utilitarianism, right? We are counting the interests or the preferences, because essentially, right, your pleasure is based on your preferences. I may not uh, enjoy ice cream, but you may, right? So if we are to legislate a law on ice cream, for example, we should outlaw mint chocolate ice cream. Okay, so that's absurd, but um, we are taking into consideration the happiness of the greatest number. So meaning, if majority of the people do not like it, then regardless of the minority who likes mint chocolate ice cream, then that law should be passed. Okay? So that is what is put forward by preference utilitarianism. So we have preferences. They count as interests, and these interests count as what is pleasurable, or what is right, or what is, because essentially what is right is what is pleasurable for utilitarianism. So what he also adds is that not only humans are counted, should be counted when we are looking for the greatest happiness of the greatest number. Okay, so he notes of ethically relevant beings. So the end goal of utilitarianism, of any policy, of any decision, should be the satisfaction of the greatest number of interest among ethically relevant beings. So given due diligence, our actions ought to be consistent with the various maximal preference satisfactions of ethically relevant beings. So what do I mean by ethically relevant beings? What are ethically relevant beings? These are not just humans. According to Singer, these are beings who have, or that has, the capacity to feel pain and to suffer. Okay? So, anong kasama dun sa ethically relevant beings? It's not just humans. Not only us can suffer or can feel pain and suffering. Animals he calls them non-human animals, not because we are animals, right? So non-human animals are also ethically relevant beings. So therefore, when we make decisions, when we make policies, okay, we need to consider the interests of these ethically relevant beings. So how did he apply that? So he applied that, for example, um, on the case of animals that are consumed for as food and are experimented for several products, like for example makeup, diba? So he is very against speciesism. Okay, so meaning that we are not just the species that are um, superior, meaning we are not the only ethically relevant being. So therefore, if we make a law, for example, if we make a law on the production of meat, of chickens, of cows, we should consider their suffering. So therefore, Peter Singer is an advocate of veganism or vegetarianism. Okay, and he is also against animal experimentation. Why? Because it is for him unacceptable. Okay, because if we are happy as humans, okay, if we are happy as humans, these species, other species, are not happy because they are being experimented upon, they are being killed for food, right? So, but it's not always positive. It's not always about animals. It could also be about humans themselves. So there is this debate of what constitutes as human, of or what constitutes as having the capacity to feel among these embryo, fetus, and infant. So according to him, he is pro-abortion. Okay, not because of the usual reasons, meaning the usual reasons are it is the mother's choice, or it is the woman's choice of what she or they will do to their bodies, right? So but according to him, his argument is that abortion is acceptable in the embryo stage because embryos cannot feel suffering. Okay, so that's one. And then a fetus, according to him, yes, indeed, it is capable of suffering, but we are utilitarian, right? If that suffering of the fetus is less than the suffering or the interests of the mother, which is usually the reason for abortion, right? Na they cannot feed the child, or they just don't want that child at that moment, or because of health issues, then it is acceptable. Okay, of course for infant, that's another issue. So again, this is not me. This is this is Singer. So the important addition for him is that we are not the only ones who should be in the equation when we get the greatest happiness of the greatest number. So it makes decision making harder, but more considerate of other ethically relevant beings. So one story that I think will could also be a point for discussion is the story about the ones who walk away from Amela. So it's about a city that's very prosperous. You have healthy children. People are living very good lives. But the idea is that their happiness depends on one child's misery. So there's this one child who is filthy, very weak, very he that they don't know if it's a he or a she, but it's a child about 5 or 6 years old living in a basement under the city, and the people know that the child is there. They teach their children about the child, and they teach their children that if the child goes out, if they clean the child, if they feed the child, then the rest or the prosperity of the city will be gone, and the city will be ruined. So essentially, all of their health and everything depends on the suffering of one child. Okay, so in utilitarianism, that is actually just, right? It is just because the quantity of people that are happy, who are happy, is definitely more than the misery of that one child. So even though he's like that child is close to dying, um, if ang kapalit nun ay mawawasak lahat yung yung nandun sa syudad na yon, then it is not worth it. So therefore, even though some people in the city would want to help the child, they won't. Okay, so there are more to the story, of course, you should read it. Yeah, but this is a story that could eventually that could be an application of utilitarianism. Okay, so now let us reflect. Okay, so utilitarianism is kind of easy to understand, and it's also very unattractive philosophical position. Okay, it's an attractive notion of justice. Why? Because it seems common sense. Like for example, when we look at the trolley problem or the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens problem, it seems common sense that they would just eat the child, that boy, or we choose one person that will die over the five because it seems simple, right? We you need to sacrifice just one so that the five could live, one person so that the three people in the boat on the boat could live, right? It's also consistent with democratic values like equality and the preference for the choice of the majority. Saan yung equality doon? Equality when J.S. Mill said that we should count one person as one. So in terms, for example, for elections, our vote count as one. Whatever our position is in society, whether we are rich, we are poor, uh, we are famous or not, our vote still counts as one. Okay, so that's equality. So that's good, right? We're counted as one. There is no preferential treatment. Okay, and for the democracy, it's always about the majority. So we elect our leaders based on who is chosen by the majority, regardless. Majority or most of the people in Philippines, where we have a multi-party system. Now, so it's not a majority, but the most votes, who has the most votes will win. So utilitarianism is actually consistent with that. Okay, so it seems very attractive. Okay, this is why many policies in the world are justified. Okay, because of the uh, cost benefit analysis, right? So yung calculus kanina is actually a cost benefit analysis, right? And most policies in the world are implemented because of that. But if we reflect on it, aren't we not considering the preferences or the interests, the pleasure, the pain of the minority? Okay, it seems common sense. We have talked about this in the trolley problem. It seems common sense that one person will be killed instead of five. But have we asked one person if um, that person is willing, okay, to sacrifice themselves for the lives of the other five? Another question is that for the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens, if they argue that the boy actually agreed that, sige, let's sacrifice me so that the three of you could live. Is it right? Is it a just act? Okay? So it is very attractive. It's common sense, but there are considerations that we need to look at. Because at the end of this course, I hope that you could also uh, think about democracy, about why or about how even we look at democracy as a positive thing. Okay, it gives us rights, it gives us freedom. Okay, in when we look at it in many lenses, it's actually not democratic at all. Okay, so yeah, so we reflect on that. So hindi lang tayo yung nagre-reflect doon because there are many critiques to utilitarianism. So one, the question that I posed a while ago, is it really egalitarian? Okay. So utilitarianism is egalitarian because of the idea nga na you count one person as one. How about the rights of individuals? Yes, you count them as one, but do you actually consider their rights? If you impose a policy that kills the minority of your population, which is a historical fact in many countries around the world, where a dominant population or a dominant race actually exterminated the minority because they label the minority as backward, as communists. In the Philippines, as drug addicts. Okay? The tokhang or the drug war of the Duterte government have killed many people who are tagged as drug addicts, and they consider this as a service to the community, that oh, these people died so that other people will fear Duterte, will fear the justice system under Duterte, and so they will not do crime anymore, they will not do drugs anymore. Okay, but how about the rights of those individuals? Okay, do we think of that when we impose those policies? So that's one critique and one application also of utilitarianism. Okay, I also asked you about this last time in the trolley problem. Who are we to say that 5 lives is more than 1 life? Okay, are we actually prescribing a common currency of value on life? Because for utilitarianism, 1 life is just 1 life. 1 person is 1 life. But we ask again in the trolley problem, what if that 1 person is a doctor who will be able to help many other people in his lifetime, in their lifetime? What if that person has the cure to cancer? Right? So who are we, or what are we taking into consideration when we are asked about the worth of 1 life? Okay. Another thing is that utilitarianism is it notes that we are animals, okay, who are slaves to our pleasure. Okay? So pleasure is subjective. Okay? Pleasure is subjective. I discussed it a while ago with interest. It's subjective. So now, how do we compare pleasures across individuals, regions, cultures, etc.? What if we ban this food, for example, this food, and minority of the people eat it, they get nourishment from it. But because of the majority that hates this food, that law is still passed anyway. What about immoral pleasures? Yes, this makes us happy, but what if it is immoral? What about what if someone kills people for fun? That's pleasurable for them. Okay, so these are the things that are not considered in utilitarianism. Okay, so again, utilitarianism is one of the mainstream discourses on justice. It's very important to look at it. And again, I end this with a reminder to reflect, of course, on these ideas of utilitarianism. So we do not just accept it as it is. So we nuance this with ideas from libertarianism in the next video. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll discuss this in our next synchronous session.